So if I had to describe Gerrard Square in one word, it would have to be uninteresting. So you may ask me, why is this episode about a tiresome place that's trapped within an early 2000s aesthetic, with its peach-colored floor tiles and an unpleasant beige modernist facade? The answer is because, well, this was my neighborhood mall growing up. Because I frequented this mall since childhood, I feel I'm able to speak with some authority regarding the mall's development and redevelopment throughout the years. Despite having gone through major renovations and rejuvenations, Gerrard Square still appears slightly dated, a relic of another time. Gerrard Square therefore stands as a fascinating emblem of a bygone era, our recent past of the emergence of the 21st century. Welcome to the next episode of Toronto Mall Rats, a series examining the history, urban decay, and preservation of Toronto's malls. Gerrard Square sits in the heart of the Leslieville community at the iconic address of 1000 Gerrard Street East, named after businessman Samuel Gerrard, who lived an impressive lifespan for the period. Gerrard Square opened its doors for the very first time on September 24, 1975 at precisely 9 a.m. We know this thanks to this flyer, which also suggests that portable color TVs were all the rage in 1975. And by portable, it should also be noted they meant that you could pick it up and physically carry the television to another room. Not that it could fit in your pocket. I mean, those old TVs weighed as much as an adult golden retriever. Upon its grand opening, the mall consisted of the anchor brands Sears, Miracle Food Mart, and Horizons, the latter of which being an experimental subsidiary of Eaton's department stores, targeting a more budget-conscious consumer. However, that experiment failed and the stores either closed or were converted to Eaton's. According to the accounts I've read, Horizons only briefly became an Eaton's before the economic recession of the early 1980s, which thus facilitated its transformation into a Zellers. One thing I clearly remember about the earlier days of Zellers was being able to enter from the grand stairway off of Gerrard Street to the south. By the late 1980s, however, this stairway was closed off and turned into a fire exit. Sadly, when Target acquired Zellers, Gerrard Square was deemed far too small to fit the needs of the American retail behemoth. As a result, Target leased it out to Walmart, which opened in September 2012. Around the corner from Walmart adjacent to the main entrance is Food Basics. But there really isn't much here to say. It was once a Miracle Mart which closed, and then it became a Food Basics in the early 1990s. More interesting is the iconic hallway entrance where the original signage still hangs above the entrance displaying Gerrard Street. Much like the menu board showcased in the previous episode of Mall Rats, this orange on brown dark color scheme is indicative of a prominent retail aesthetic of the 70s, one that I'm glad to see remains present in the mall. The hallway has always been lined with boutique shops and a row of benches along the side of the anchoring grocery store. In fact, my grandmother used to come here almost daily to socialize with her friends and peers. Aside from church on Sundays, this was the only spot where they would meet, gossip, chat, and reminisce about the days of old. Thankfully, there still remains a small crowd on those benches. The main atrium of Gerrard Square has undergone several significant changes over the years. In my earliest memories, the atrium had white speckled tiled floors accented with dark silver. Both escalators used to face each other, and there was an old bronze sculpture of two hands holding an egg encircled by a platform on which people used to sit. At the bottom of the western escalator was a small open-ceiling restaurant that served sandwiches and ice cream. The atrium would play host to many events, such as a Power Wheels mini racetrack for kids to try out their tiny Jeeps, or the Toronto Dundas Mixed Baseball League, which would hold registrations in early spring for parents who wanted to get their lazy Nintendo-playing kids out of the house. Today, hidden behind the escalator sits a reminder of Gerrard Square's lost history, a trace of its former identity. An old merry-go-round on which I smacked my head while getting off of when I was a kid, an old photo booth, and a group of 25-cent gumball machines. These items feel anachronistic, oddly out of space, in the contemporary era of digital media. And yes, those gumball machines are still 25 cents. Toward the rear end of the mall lies a food court and Home Depot. I don't really recall much regarding the food court. I do remember an independent Chinese restaurant which made some of the best chicken balls and other Canadian Chinese cuisine. Oh yeah, and there was also a Black's photography store off to the one end of the food court. Some people have recalled that in place of the CIBC once stood an arcade. This must have been before my time, as I always remembered the bank being there. The arcade machines that I remember sat right outside the entrance to Zellers, the space now occupied by a convenience store. And of course, at the other end of the food court sits a Home Depot that used to be a Sears, but more on that in a bit. In the upper levels of the mall, immediately at the top of the escalators is the Staples, which used to be a Byway, a chain of bargain discount stores. To the left for a period of time was Stitches, which is now Blue Notes. There was also a pet store called Fins and Feathers where I got my very first pet, a hamster named Einstein. Rest in peace, Einstein. You were way too smart for your own good. Among the biggest changes to the upper floor occurred not too long after Sears closed. Ah, Sears. How I missed your catalog and fancy cafeteria. That's right, Sears had a decently sized cafeteria on the second floor. This is where I'd always get an order of grilled cheese and mashed potatoes. Fortunately, the retail giant closed its doors in the early 2000s. Home Depot took over the bottom floor, but the upper floor was opened up into a walkway adorned with skylights. Winners opened shortly after the renovations on the south side. Meanwhile, one of Gerrard Square's newest tenants, surprise surprise, is Planet Fitness, which opened up on the north side of the walkway. So a particularly interesting feature of Gerrard Square is the presence of payphones, yet another example of the lasting trace of history, though I wasn't able to find one in working order. Wait a minute. What's this sign? Well, that's not good. Oh, whoops. If we look at some older photos of Gerrard Square, we see it's adorned with dark brown corrugated metal that hugs exposed brick walls. Such images evoke a strong sense of nostalgia for me. This look quickly became outdated, however, and was replaced in the early 2000s with the off-white concrete walls seen today. Outside the mall, the McDonald's experienced one of the most significant changes recently. It originally sat right by the parking lot entrance, but in 2006, rather than undergo renovation, it was completely demolished and moved to the other corner of the parking lot. Gerrard Square. Sadly, it's almost recognizable from its former Zadie self. I'm not sure if this is a bad thing. As the Galleria Mall attests, it did not receive substantial upgrades or renovations, and yet it remains empty and on life support. Meanwhile, Gerrard Square is filled with life and people, with regular community events and an active Facebook page. Thank you, Gerrard Square, and its many employees over the years for being the space where a lot of my happy childhood memories took place. I only hope that it continues to generate positive memories for today's younger generation, who may happen to fall in love with peach-colored floor tiles.